Yep.
6. Great.
All right.
So just a reminder, like, I guess, like, be on your best behavior, or if you have problems with this like being recorded, just let us know individually, and we can arrange something. If you don't want, I think we're gonna start storing these like on a YouTube channel or something for the future. So again, thank you so much for joining. I see there's like 17 of us in this room, so that's pretty cool. Just another reminder to make sure to mute your mics during the workshop. And if you have any questions for Matt, use the chat box on the right-hand side to send them over to us. And we're gonna get to answering them at the end of this workshop during the Q&A. So a little bit about me and Pullproof. My name is Christina. I'm also an artist, and I'm the communications director for Pullproof. And we are a printmaking studio based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we offer a fully equipped screen printing facility with a shared workspace and a small workfront gallery in the Garfield neighborhood of Pittsburgh. Due to the pandemic, unfortunately, we have been closed, but we are finding new ways to share our work like this. This is the first digital workshop that we're doing, and hopefully we get to do some more. And what's really exciting is today we have created an online store launched today, and you can find work for sale by our members in that store, like prints by Matt Van Asselt. So if you love the work that you're seeing in this digital workshop, you can buy one on our online store. I just put the link in the chat box right there. So if you are feeling, feeling generous with your stimulus money, just go to that link and you can buy a print by one of our co-founders, Matt Van Asselt. A little bit more about Matt. So Matt Van Asselt is an artist who works primarily with silkscreen printing. He graduated from SUNY Purchase with a BFA in printmaking in 2013. And after that, he lived in New York City for 4 years, where he continued to make art, work as a silkscreen technician in a contemporary art studio, played music, and ran a small press and record label. In 2017, he made the fateful decision to move to Pittsburgh, and he co-founded Pullproof Studio. And he continues to make work there today. So the following, he's going to go over his process, how he makes his very intricate, detailed screen prints. And then we're going to follow it up with a Q&A where he's going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into his process, go over materials, and also answer user-submitted questions that we've received via Instagram and also from this chat if you receive any more. Another reminder to mute your mics, please. Please submit questions in the chat box as Matt presents. And here is Matt Van Asselt.
Hey, everyone. I am going to pull up this. Give me 1 second. All right. So the sad thing for me is that when this is up on my screen, I can't actually see anyone, but I trust that you're all still there. And thanks for being here, and thank you, Christina, for organizing this. Hopefully we will keep doing this. And like Christina said, if you have any questions that you can think of during the presentation, just type them into the chat. And the second portion of this will be Q&A. I'm just going to start with a little slide presentation of some work. I've been out of art school for a while. And for those of you who haven't gone to art school, it's this place where you talk about art a lot. So leaving was kind of a relief for me, honestly. I've always felt like the images I chose to make were very intuitive for me, and I really like being able to work without thinking about what to say about the pieces. Not that I felt like they were completely devoid of content, just that it was a nice break from overthinking things. But recently I had to submit an artist statement for a show, and that's not uncommon. I have had to do that a lot. But the difference this time was that it was fairly likely that people I knew would read the statement. And so I thought, well, maybe I better actually read this document that I wrote 10 years ago before I just submit it. And then I thought, well, better yet, maybe I shouldn't read it, and I should just write something new. So I'm going to start just by reading what I wrote for that show, which was the PCA show, which called What Have We Done, which was at the end of last year. And I had to give an artist talk for that show, and I did actually prepare for that talk, but to be honest, I completely blacked out. So if anyone was there, Aaron was, and they remember that I said anything interesting, please let me know. Maybe I can pull that in at the end. Here's the statement. I'm interested in the landscape and the way that we alter the landscape and what it says about human ambition and culture. I'm drawn to patterns, contrasts, small moments that are somehow emblematic of larger phenomena. I'm also drawn to natural forms as well as constructed forms in and of themselves. I like the idea of utopia. My cut and pasted reimaginations of our world share our utopian quest, occasionally misguided, often sidetracked along the way. I'm pretty happy with that statement. I think it's concise and it pretty accurately sums up what I'm after in my work. Unfortunately for everyone here, I'm supposed to keep talking for a while. Just joking. I do want to dig a little deeper into a lot of that. And in order to do that, I'm going to do two things. First, I will talk a tiny bit about my process. And then at the end, I'll talk more about technical process stuff in the Q&A. And then I also want to show just some work by other artists that I look at. So a big part of my process is observing and photographing. I'll do that little changeover real quick again. I rely heavily on photographs in all my work. Most of my compositions are created from collaging photographs. And this is important to me because it means that everything is real. Nothing is made up, even if it's not presented exactly as I found it. So what I photograph and where I photograph become really important factors in what my work ends up looking like. I love traveling. I love driving around with this sense of wide wonder that one has when exploring somewhere new. And so the majority of my source imagery I shoot while on the road. I've had the pleasure of driving all around the country. I used to be in a band that toured fairly regularly, and sadly music is now canceled. But that means that I've been able to observe similarities and differences of American cities and landscapes. But I get to observe them in this sort of drive-by way. Drive up to a city, and Pittsburgh is a really good example of this. So you just turn the corner on the highway and then there's Pittsburgh. You get this brief but intimate look at like a very specific element of the city when you're there to play music, and then you drive out. So I think that this sort of the passerby perspective also informs my compositions a lot. And a lot of the photos that I take, I actually just take out of the car when I'm driving. So actually I made this book not too long ago. And this is a book that is in our store. I won't do that again, I promise. But this book is all drawings that were just made from photographs I shot out of the car window. And the book is called Roadside America. These are really small, so they might actually be actual size if you're sitting back and looking at them from a distance. I don't really know how computers work. Another thing that I want to say about the photographs I take is that I'm really drawn to pattern and shape. And that for me, pattern and shape in the built environment are kind of imbued with a humor in a way that's hard to explain. But I can try to show some examples. Like here, something about the shed and the mountain and the forms mimicking each other is kind of amusing. The arch and the curb. I just like these little houses peeking out behind the fence a lot. And then sometimes I'm just drawn to these moments that look like collages, but are actually not. Like this just really doesn't look that real. And going back to this image which I showed earlier, next to the print, the way these two roadways separated by this fence are just look like they're on totally different planes. Like, I really like that. And sometimes the humor is very subtle. Maybe like this isn't that funny, but sometimes it's a little more self-evident. I hope. I think that's funny. I don't know. But all these images, just I take them obsessively wherever I go, and eventually I comb through them and kind of compile them into new images. Here's one that made its way into that print in the top left. Now I want to talk just briefly about some other artists that I look at. And I would say the common thread for everyone, including myself, is that everyone is observing the world around them and reciting it through their own filter. And obviously everyone has a different point of view, but everyone fits into this sort of worldview spectrum, which can maybe be summed up by this painting, which essentially goes from negative to positive, or you could say realistic to sublime, or kind of quantify it in any label you want. But because I was sharing photographs, I'll start with photographs. I think photographs are really fascinating because they're literally just the world, you know, captured by this weird device that traps light somehow. This is a photograph by Stephen Shore. His photographs are incredible, and a lot of the scenes he finds really resonate with like the kind of things that speak to me in the world that I find too. So I really enjoy looking at his photographs and his compositions. He does a lot more intimate scenes with people, and a lot of motels, and also like traveling America and taking photos everywhere. But his landscapes, well, all of his photographs, but especially his landscapes, I really respond to. These next photos are Edward Bertinsky. Basically only shoots instances of humans destroying the planet. Lots of aerial photographs that become sort of abstractions using these found phenomena. And I don't want to say found forms because they're not natural, they're created forms, but using these found phenomena as formal elements to make these beautiful compositions with somewhat ugly subject matter. Changing gears, George Bellows is just a fantastic painter who I love to look at. It's an early 1900s painting in New York, and interested in sort of the grit of working class life at that time, but rendering it in this really, really beautiful way. And on that note, Wayne Thiebaud is another one of my favorites. Also, I think he's just really interested in paint. Just like loves to move paint around, but also into this formal beauty in the urban landscape, which I think is a theme for me as well. He's really known for like the cakes and stuff, but his landscapes are all really, really good. And kind of further to the edge of the spectrum is David Hockney, and these you can't text me while you're at the station. Sorry. These are all iPad drawings that David Hockney did, and they're just so fun. I mean, to me, these are like just about the pure joy of making pictures. It's hard not to like them, in my opinion. And I think just like the joy of mark making and of drawing is something that I also strive to capture. And show two more, and these break the rules a little bit because they're still observing the world, but instead of just reflecting it, they're sort of offering a critique or offering guidance. This is an image by a late 60s Italian collective called Pullproof Studio that were sort of part of this radical architecture movement. And this was maybe framed as a utopian project, but was really a critique of the sort of architecture and ideas in architecture that were going around at that time that had this sort of utopian bent. Um, and it's, I've always just really liked this piece because, well, and I think it's the collage element kind of informed how I started going about building my compositions too. And last but not least, this is an artist named Bodis Isaac Kingles, who's a Congolese artist working from the 80s until 2015 and passed away. And this is like pure utopian. Like every building's function is described by the artist in the piece. He describes how happy everyone is. He describes how people from all countries live in different buildings in the city and get along, and there are no cops. And these pieces, I mean, they're so fun, and they're just so full of optimism and so full of joy. And I obviously, I love the constructed element. These are all models, by the way. They're not drawings or anything. So I ended with these last two because I think that this idea of utopia is kind of central for me. Not necessarily utopia in the same sense as it was for Kingles or for Super Studio. Utopia can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's been a lot of writing about what it means too, ever since Thomas More's book Utopia in the early 1500s, where he writes about this island utopia, which is a critique on kind of ideals at the time. But I think what it means for me is kind of all of the above. In the statement that I led with, I say, I like the idea of utopia. My cut and pasted reimaginations of our world share our utopian quest, occasionally misguided, often sidetracked along the way. And what I mean is that utopia for me is not the declaration or realization of an ideal, but just a striving or a way of making decisions. And what the impetus is for any given decision can look very different. Someone planting flowers in front of their house is a very different idea of utopia than someone raising a city block to build high-end retail or luxury condos. But both of these decisions can be cast through the lens of utopia, and only taken together can we really understand what utopia means for us as a whole. So I think that sort of finding the utopian in the everyday is a nice way of thinking about what my aim is, or casting the everyday as inherently utopian. I think of my images as humble, not trying to make any grand declarations like a lot of utopian projects. Just trying to capture small moments that give you a sense of place, a sense of belonging to a world. And how you feel about that world is ultimately up to you. I think that there are also a lot about living with contradictions, seeing a formal beauty in something ugly, for example, or in the example I gave earlier, the two versions of utopia are clearly at odds, but they both affect the landscape, and they both affect how we see and understand the world. So I'm gonna end on this print that I showed first. I'll let you look at that for a second, and then I'm gonna go out of this mode and answer some questions. And the questions, I hope that if you have thought of any questions, you can add them to the chat. It can be about anything. A lot of the questions I have seen already are technical in nature, but there are no rules. Thanks for being with me this far.
Thanks, Matt. That was really informative.
Thanks.
So I will start the Q&A shortly. I want to take a screen grab of everybody because this is great. We have 29 people on right now. So I'm going to start the Q&A with, oh, more people are turning on their cameras. Okay, smile, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Yay. Oh my God, everyone's so cute. I miss all of you guys. The inner extrovert in me is really, I'm going a little crazy, but this is definitely helping. All right, so we're gonna start the Q&A. The first question is, Matt, when did you discover the screen printing medium, and why is it your primary working medium?
That is a great question, and I wish I had a great answer. But I first screen printed at an arts summer program in, I want to say I was like in 6th grade, or I was in middle school. And something about it just really clicked for me. And I've also always been like playing music in bands, and silk screen printing as a way of like producing band stuff was always really useful. So I think that that was kind of my way into it at first, but something about the process just always made a lot of sense to me. And it seems like a lot more roundabout than painting, and it is. And honestly, I don't really have a good answer as to why I prefer it so much, because it just makes sense to me. It's kind of just like a natural way of working for me now.
Cool. What kind of materials do you like to use as you work?
Well, I have seen this question ahead of time, and I brought with me this box. There it is. So I can just go through a couple things quickly. I don't know if this is all going to be interesting to everyone, but I don't know if that's actually too bright.
Matt, do you also happen to have like a film on you?
I do have a film. So my favorite materials to make the separations work with are these Sharpie oil-based markers. And I use this watercolor ink called Pro Black a lot. It's just an opaque watercolor ink. You can thin it with a little water and paint it. So I have a bunch of brushes and foam brush, wider brushes, different brushes that I paint right onto the films with. And really that and the Sharpie markers are probably 90% of what I use. I really like using Rubylith, which I did not bring any of. But that's basically a masking film that you can cut away and just create stencils with. And then I also will like tear paper or tape random things on that I can find when that makes sense too. But really, yeah, I love these Sharpie markers. And then I also have like some wax pencils, some oil pastels, lithograms, and kind of anything that you can make an opaque mark with is a really good tool. Because I'm working analog, I like to kind of mix it up, because I do feel like one thing that's nice about silkscreen printing is once you expose the film to the screen, like all the marks kind of coalesce in this way. So you can do a lot of weird things all meshed together. And then even if your film looks like this absurd collage, the actual printed image looks really cohesive. And I can show a film real quick. I would imagine, well, actually, I don't know everyone here, but if you're not familiar with silkscreen printing, basically every color is its own drawing in an opaque drawing on a clear film. So, for example, this is a bad example because it's just a bunch of scribbles. But that's a film that, this is just what I have handy. That's a film that created the kind of flora in this print that I'm currently in process working on.
Nice, nice.
What about paper?
Paper. My favorite paper is Arch 88, Arch Silkscreen 88. It's just really nice. It's really smooth. It's 300 grams per square meter, nice and thick. But I'll settle for heavyweight BFK. Silkscreen 88 is a little expensive. But any cotton rag paper is good. I mean, honestly, recently I've been buying, Pullproof has a supplier that we can buy wholesale through. And I've just been shopping their discount section, and it's all good. Any cotton rag paper is going to work.
Cool. What kind of screen do you like to use?
Victory Factory all the way. I've only ever used Victory Factory screens. Pullproof only has Victory Factory screens. Mesh count, I pretty much only use 195 screens. I have 230 screens. Actually, I use them both interchangeably. I don't really have a preference, but my imagery doesn't need a really fine film or a really fine screen mesh. So I usually stick to 195 just because it's nice.
I'm gonna roll it back a little bit. So what is it about cotton rag paper that makes it a superior paper than other papers? And what is the difference between a low mesh screen and a high count mesh screen?
Cotton rag paper is just designed for absorbing ink, so it's kind of designed for print processes in general. It doesn't curl, it's just nice and substantial. As far as screens go, the mesh count, the finer the mesh count, kind of the more precise details you can get. But at a certain point, printing a screen by hand becomes too hard with a really high mesh count. And the lower mesh count would be for substrate that's more textured, like canvas or something. That's harder to get really fine details onto. So anything lower than 195 is really just like for printing shirts or fabric. And anything higher than 195, in my opinion, is for photographic processes like fine halftone dots and whatnot. 195, I feel like, is the happy medium for analog images on paper.
Got it. How much planning is involved as you print? Do you usually digitally composite your screen prints, or do you fly by the seat of your pants?
That is a good question, and the answer is both. Because I'm working from photographs, I have like a finished idea in mind. Like the photographs are in color and they look like the world. So I know what I'm after, and I know like what colors kind of create the building blocks of the scene that I've created. So definitely I'm using a lot of local color from the photographs. I mean, it's not precise, it's often enhanced, let's say. But so I'll start kind of referencing the photographs pretty heavily, and then once I get a couple colors down, I will just kind of work off the print and play it by ear. Whatever I feel like I need, I'll just keep adding. So for example, this print that I showed kind of earlier, it's in a place where it's like, it's almost done, but I kind of need to, like, I want to add some more tonal variation down here. I want to cover some of this red. These buildings are a little too Eastery. They're hard to see, but so I'm going to change some of the colors and push and pull stuff. Actually, that's a good thing to say, is my process is really like put the forms in and the main colors, and then push and pull everything with kind of transparent layers until the light and the space make sense to me.
Do you do any of like advanced compositing, like when you know when you've picked like the main colors you're using, do you like composite it in Photoshop and you sort of play around with it analog? Is it just like is it like a combination of that?
Wait, sorry. What was that?
Like do you like just like more like in depth with your process? Like do you ever like composite with Photoshop? Like do your color overlays in Photoshop and yeah.
Never for these prints, because they're just too big. But for like contract stuff, I do that mostly. And I have an example right here. So one thing, and this is something I was very proud of, one thing that I just developed, and I'm taking full credit for this, I've never seen it anywhere else, not too long ago, is this kind of color overlay grid. And so what it is, it's one shape in one screen that you print in 4 times in different colors, just turning it 90 degrees every time. And that gives you all of the different color overlays that you get out of those 4 colors. So these 4 colors don't give you a ton, but depending on your 4 colors, you can get up to like 15 different colors out of them. So if you make that first, which I will do when I'm trying to like be a little more concise in my screens, like if someone's hiring me, they don't want me to just like make 20 screens ad hoc as I feel like it. So then I can draw to those specific 4 colors, including the secondary colors and tertiary colors, and create images that way. So this, for example, this dark green that is kind of like a main color isn't a printed color, it's an overlay color, but I could draw for it because I already knew I would get it, if that makes any sense.
We're getting a lot of questions in the chat box. I think we'll start asking them after I have 2 more questions, and then we'll get started with the chat box questions after these 2.
Cool.
So how do you mix inks, and what do you like to use for color matching?
I have a Pantone swatch guide, not the full set, because that's like $10,000 or something. And there's like a million swatch books, but I have just a basic starter guide. And it's honestly, I really recommend it. It's so nice because even if you don't have a full set of Pantone bases, which I do not, for any color, it tells you what the mixing ratios is. And so if you refer to the bases in the swatch book, you can kind of see, okay, well, I can make this base with this color, and it will tell you how to build colors. I don't like that it uses a lot of black, which I try not to do. That's the one thing I took away from painting 1 is don't mix black into your colors. But it's really helpful just for like guiding you, and I've gotten pretty good at using that as a reference, not necessarily as a recipe, but as a reference for making colors. But I just use speedball inks, and I only have primaries, warm and cool, and I just use the Pantone swatch book to guide me. And I use a lot of transparent base. I love transparent base. On the bottle, it says like you're not supposed to use more than like 10 or 20% of base in your inks, but my inks are all like 95% transparent base.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like you have like a really like painterly approach to color mixing, and I feel like I mean, like when I do printmaking, it's very, I don't really do a lot of mixing, and I'm not scared to use black. So it's interesting. I mean, it also makes sense for your process as well because your prints are also very painterly as well. So that makes a lot of sense. Last but not least, how do you collaborate with artists on screen prints, such as your Bunker Projects editions? And do you want to talk more about those?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll move aside because this is one of those collaborative editions behind me. So I don't know if it is here or not, maybe, but one of my favorite things to do, and one thing that I've tried to start doing a lot more of professionally, is working with other painters and artists to make prints when the artist is not necessarily a printmaker. And really, I just, my one thing I can say is like, if you have a full color mock-up of like a sketch or a painting or a digital image of what you want to reproduce, it's very easy for me to sort of to guide you through the separation process, because that's basically my own process in my own work. So I have the sort of color overlays in my mind that I can help explain to you and sort of guide through the process. So it's a lot of like encouraging the artists I'm working with to really show me a rendering of what they're after, so I can help them piece it together with separating it into colors. And, you know, depending on their mark making, I can give guidance based on, you know, how to get it to look like they might want it to look too. I think I like working with people who are trying to make things that don't look like prints, but I'm also always happy to make things that do look like prints. But it really depends on the artist.
That's awesome. That's like a nice plug too. So if anyone is not a printmaker and they want to see their work screen printed, Matt can help you with that.
True. Very true.
Okay, so we're about 3 minutes until 7:15. I know on the Facebook event we said we're going into 7:15, but we have a lot of user contributed questions. We also have questions that we got from Instagram. So what I'll do is I will go through the chat questions, and then I will go through the Instagram questions, and then if there are any more from the chat box, I will hop back onto the chat box questions. If that sounds good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so Nick asks, why do you prefer printmaking for your work? You sort of touched upon that during the presentation, but if you want to, address it again, you totally can.
Yeah, well, I'll also say that I do, it's really nice to have multiples. Like, I've never had to completely get rid of anything. I have a copy of every print I've ever made. It's hard to imagine what it would feel like to like sell a painting and then it's not yours anymore. So you can just avoid that with prints. And you can sell them more affordably because there are more of them. You can give them away. It's nice to have a couple copies of things. Though I would say the real reason is just a sort of intuitive attachment to the medium.
Awesome. Charlie Barber asks, do you create depth/atmosphere with layers of transparent colors or distinct opaque colors?
That's a good question. Usually transparent colors, but playing with transparency and opacity is always fun. So like some printmakers, like if anyone wants to Google Stella Ebner, to make these really, really beautiful painterly prints with like tons and tons of just transparent layers. And I like that a lot, but maybe it's because I'm lazy, or maybe it's like I like kind of more chunkier looks too. Like I try not to go too far into like layering transparency over transparency over transparency. Just enough, just the right amount.
How do you know when it's just enough?
It's done, That's when I don't know.
Just look at it and you know that it's just right.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's nice to have some like solid areas to rest your eyes on. That's also it's silkscreen printing, so you got to honor it a little bit by putting a couple graphic marks in there.
You like honoring the graphic quality of the medium with the large transparent graphic fields of color.
Yeah. It's nice that you can have a little of everything too.
Yeah, for sure. Karen Liu asks, what is your process of choosing ink colors for each piece? Do you play with the colors on the reference photos themselves first?
That's a good question. The answer to that is that I look at the photos that I'm referencing, and you'll be like, okay, well, I know I need green because there's a lot of grass, and I know I need blue because there's the sky, or I know this building, I want this building to be a red building. And I'll kind of start with like 5 colors that I know I'll need. And I'll know in my mind, I don't actually mix them usually, but I'll say like, okay, this red is going to be a nice dark like brick red. It's not going to be really transparent. Or this green is going to be like a really transparent, like sappy green. So I can kind of imagine, I've been doing it for a while, so I do a lot of the color overlaying in my mind, and I can sort of like build out with, let's say, the first 5 colors. Like I can put them together in my head and say like, okay, with these 5 colors, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then once all that stuff is printed, then I keep adding until I feel like it's done. But at first it's definitely like choosing local colors or colors that I feel like I want to include from the photographs. and then just going from there. But for the beginning of the print, like I'll draw 5 films usually, unless I'm like kind of stuck. 5 films before I even print anything. So there's no color. Everything is just a black and white drawing until I've drawn like the first couple films.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's like you really think about it's sort of like you think about large planes of air depending on the source imagery that you use, and you sort of like pick and choose from there.
Yeah.
So this was sent from Bruce to me. And he asks, a lot of your recent cityscape work includes coastline and seascapes. Does water and the coastline have significance to your idea of utopia?
I would say yes. I mean, I grew up on the Hudson River, I think, which was very formative. And living in New York, you're surrounded by water. Living in Pittsburgh is the farthest. I mean, I know we have rivers, but it's the farthest I've ever lived from like water. And yeah, I do think it is important. I've never actually thought about that. But the other thing I'll say on that subject is that right after I graduated, I did a residency in Vancouver, Canada for a while, like 6 months. And so right out of school, kind of my first taste of living in the world, not as a college student, was like getting to be an artist in this print shop in Vancouver. And Vancouver, if you've been there, or if you haven't been there, is just built into the coast. Like there's a kind of inlet that goes all around the city and a path around it, and there's oceans everywhere. And it's a really beautiful city, and it's really integrated into the landscape. And it's also, it feels very utopian because it's so modern. So I think Vancouver influenced me a lot in a weird way. Not that I necessarily would recommend Vancouver, but it was definitely an influential, informative moment for me.
I think like maybe there is also a part of you that longs for like a coastline being landlocked here, probably, maybe.
Definitely. I mean, yeah. Pittsburgh could use an ocean. Let's face it.
The rivers are nice though. That's like, you know.
There's no river access.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But moving on, Heather Swenson asks, are you drawing on acetate films?
The specific product I use is called Graphics Clear Lay. The 003 thickness is what I usually buy, but that 005 is very nice if you feel like splurging. It comes in rolls, and it's cheap, and it's totally substantial. I find like quote unquote acetate is just pricier. I don't really understand what the difference is. The clear lay is really nice. It's dimensionally stable. It takes the ink. I mean, the watercolor ink, like you could scratch it off if you tried to, but if you're careful, it's fine. It's great, and it's cheap.
Can we maybe see like your film again?
Yeah. Here it is. Let me find one with more information on it. This doesn't really have more information on it, but it's got some information. It's just like a big clear piece of plastic with some brush marks on it, really.
And you don't ever digitally do digital output. You only use ink and
Very rarely.
marker.
Yeah. I mean, my studio in New York, our printer was broken the entire time I was there. Maybe I would have gotten into digital if I had the output, but every time I wanted to, I would have filmed. I would get it printed somewhere else, and I would have to go like half an hour to get the film, and then travel an hour to my studio, and blah, 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 blah. But like, for example, this print behind me is all digitally output. That was just separated in Photoshop. So it's something that I do like to do it. And it's something that I want to start doing more of. I've been thinking a lot more about digital drawing while in quarantine. But I don't really do it that often, kind of out of just because it's expensive, to be honest with you.
I think, yeah, it is. It can be very expensive, but I think, I think your references to the Hockney digital drawings, that could be like maybe a good starting point if you ever want to
Yeah.
explore that realm a little bit more. Those are really nice. I love those, the iPad drawings.
Yeah, that's something I haven't actually done it yet, but it's something I will do. Let's say that before this is over. It's like a couple really well planned, like 4-color digital drawings.
Nice. I'm looking forward to seeing them.
Thanks.
Aaron Regal asks, how many prints do you usually pull in a single given edition and why?
The answer is I usually shoot for 10, and so I'll print like 12 to 15 sheets, and then I have some mess ups. And why is because more seems unreasonable and less seems like it's so much work. I should at least make 10. That's all I got.
How many mess ups do you usually have in one edition?
It depends. It's really, the mess ups are more about color. Like it depends on how clear in my mind I am about color. Like this one that I've sort of been showing you below, I changed up a couple colors. So I'll like print 1 or 2, and then I'll be like, oh no, I don't like that color, and then those 2 are no longer usable. So usually not that many though, like 2 or 3.
Elaine Scher asks, how many screens do you usually use to make the finished product?
It really depends. I would say it's always around 12. I don't think I've ever gone higher than 20 layers, but and I try to keep it lower. The less I can do, the better, but yeah, usually like 10 to 15, I guess.
A lot of colors.
A lot of colors.
John Cardiello asks, at the end, would it be possible to write in here or somewhere the names of all the artists that you have referenced in the first half?
Yes, definitely.
Cool. And Heather asks, would you be willing to share your special color overlay shape thingy?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. Anyone who wants my shape, I will email it to you. Just let me know. Heather, I'll send it to you.
Awesome. And so that's the end of the chat box questions. I'm going to move on to the Instagram questions, and we have about 4 more questions to go. I don't know who this is. His Instagram handle is at Lord Huja. Lord Huja, are you in here?
It's okay. You don't have to.
He asks, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
That's a horrible question to ask someone, I have no idea. At this moment in time, I have no idea. That's all I can say to that. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I see myself in 10 years in a farm somewhere.
Nice. Yeah, it could be a farm. That sounds pretty good.
Out of this pandemic, stronger than ever.
Exactly.
Nick Troutman asks, any tips on overlaying colors to reduce screens on prints?
Yes, use my color overlay shape. It really maximizes your ability to plan for color overlays. And as we all know, full color printed goods out in the world are produced using only 4 colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, all in little dots overlaid to create the illusion of full color palettes. So with 4 colors, you can really do a lot.
I think you should maybe patent your color shape thingy. And
Yeah, I should. I
name it
will.
Van Asselt color shape thingy.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Nick Troutman asks, how do you get such perfect alignment on multiple editions of full bleed prints?
Good question. The first answer is that I never print anything full bleed. Everything is torn down after the fact. So that makes it a lot easier because, I mean, really, I just put little X's in all my corners on all the films and on whatever my original matrix is, and I just make sure they line up. And I was going to say something else, and I forgot what it was. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is that also my way of drawing is such that like actual precise registration is not really important. So a lot of them like look like they're probably registered really well, and a lot of them actually are registered well, but it doesn't actually matter for a lot of my imagery. Like a photograph, like this Vita's print behind me, for example, like a lot of these, it's much more important on something like that. And if I showed you up close, like there would be some areas that are not perfect, for which I am sorry to Vita.
Anything, Charlie,
Wait, you're
like registration?
Can you say it again?
Wondering, you have any, like, sorry, hold on. Connection is unstable. Am I all good now?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can.
So Charlie Barber asked this on Instagram, but I'm also curious about this too. If you have any registration.
Do you want to just type it?
Tip.
Charlie could ask it.
Oh my God.
Or I could check the Instagram.
Registration techniques.
Registration
Registration hot tips.
hot tips. Registration hot tips. Yeah, actually, I do. In school, I think a lot of people learn to register by printing on a transparent sheet that's taped down. So you print and then you kind of line up your paper under the transparency and then you fold the transparency out of the way. But I only register with no ink in my screen. So it's a little clunkier at first. I'm just kind of sliding the paper around under the screen and then pressing down and seeing if it's good. But what it means is that there's no, you always know if it's right or not before you start. And when something's not right and there's ink in your screen, then you just turn into like a stress ball. So if you just make sure it's right before you start, it makes it a lot easier. So I would say, yeah, just register kind of by lining it up, and you can attach paddles and stuff if you want, lining it up under the screen with no ink in the screen. Look through the screen directly onto the paper, make sure it's in place, and also always use the same sheet for registration. Those are my hot tips.
Awesome. Last but not least, from David Love. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any high stakes print job stories
from New York City?
Any high stakes print job stories from New York City? That's a good question. The answer is yes. What will I tell here now? I don't know. I will say, well, this is a low stakes story actually, that the artist I work for, he sold a painting to Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was probably like an $120,000 painting or something. And I call it a painting, but it was a silkscreen print, a silkscreen on a silkscreen. And Leo, he broke it, or he claims it broke on its own, but somehow painting broken, split up the middle. So we made him a new one. Simple as that. pays to be Leo. You got a new painting. It was a little worse than the first one, but
Did he pay for a new one?
no.
What?
Yeah. Art, the value is completely made up. Let me tell you.
How was there a slash in the middle of the piece?
Well, so it was actually on a silk screen. That was the media of the painting. And as those of us who have silk screened know, sometimes your screens just tear randomly. Usually it happens because you've used them for 10 years and this was a brand new screen, but I don't know. Maybe he bumped into it, maybe. I don't know what Leo does in his home.
Yeah, that seems very suspicious. I don't think it split on its own. Something happened there.
Yes, but if you're Leo, you can just get a new version of the painting you broke.
True.
Yeah.
All right. If anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat box.
And I'm typing up the names of all those artists that I said right now. I think that's all of them.
I can unmute you all so you can all shout things at Matt if you want to.
Yeah, we can just turn this into a big party. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks for doing this, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your process. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Nice beard.
Thank you.
Hi.
Who's that?
There's too many people talking.
Amala.
Wait, how do you make it in gallery view? I do myself. There we go. Well, does anyone else have any good thoughts for me?
Who's this? Oh, this is your niece.
What?
I think I see Jamie and Amalia.
I do.
But wait, I have a question. Is Heather Swenson still on there?
Yep, I'm right here.
Heather, hi. I'm
Everyone
Matt.
should look up Heather's art.
But I have a question for Matt. We see, Matt, we see some of your things, Heather. We really like them. Matthew, whose print is hanging in the hallway?
Where?
On the way to your bedroom.
Oh, that's I'll tell you later.
Sorry, I thought it was you because I've heard your name so much.
We have a lot of Heather's work.
I've got a lot of Matt's work too.
Go on a quick walk. Here's a Heather Swenson.
Oh, right.
All
I
that
owe your things, Heather. I know who you are exactly, and I always like them.
Anyway,
Thanks.
Tom, thanks for coming.
Matt, you've got a little fan club in Rochester from the Print Club of Rochester here. I've shown them a bunch of your work and everybody really loves your screen prints.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
They never got back to me about that edition thing. I'm assuming
Yeah. I think we're still trying to figure out for the next year. It's once a year, so we'll, I'm sure, be in touch.
Nice. Yeah, hopefully we'll get to hang out sometime soon.
I know. A visit that we've been trying for like a long time now that hasn't happened.
Be here this weekend.
What?
Now we're having a private conversation.
Yeah.
Or was it?
It was last weekend. Okay. It was April. Yeah.
Okay.
Still in quarantine.
Here's a thing, and this was something I was going to say to Christina privately, but since we're all here,
Chris, we heard Amalia there briefly.
I was gonna say, I'm just gonna mute you guys. Okay. That one thing that I would be interested in doing, if you think that there would be an audience for it, is doing like a very specific, like using Photoshop to create silkscreen output workshop. If that might be interesting, I don't know if it would be.
For CMYK, for sure. Like I would like to know the 4-color process in Photoshop.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like a kind of mesh between analog intentions and digital, but that could be touched on. Something to think about.
Yeah, I think we could probably also like send out, like ask people, you know, what they would be interested in.
Yeah. Also, on that note, I think this is formally over. So if anyone is like, I want to leave, but there's still time, you're welcome to leave. I feel like I can't leave first, so no. I'm not saying I want you to leave. Also,
Yeah. Do you want us to leave? Is that what
no,
you're?
no.
We're being kicked out.
Yeah, no.
I mean,
I mean, I'm pretty hungry, so I'm actually gonna log off, but I think you guys can all like stay and chat with the artist. But thanks for attending, and make sure to follow us at Pullproof Studio on Instagram. And thanks for coming.
And go to our store and buy.
We launched a store, yeah.
Buy Matt's print on our online store. All right, bye guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Thank you for running.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt. Matt, I got my real life buildings package today,
Nice.
which was awesome, but I'm a little worried I'm turning into a Matthew super fan.
You've reached your limit. You can't have
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely can't get any more merch, maybe more prints someday, but
Well, getting the value pack after the band is over helps, because it's the value it's great value.
yeah.
Throwing everything I have here.
Same with that closer print that I got after the fact. Because that's one of my favorite. I love that print.
That's a nice one. I do remember. Yeah. I guess you do have a bunch. But
Are you gonna do more auctions, Matt?
Am I gonna do more auctions? I think so. I had fun with that. Not like right away. It's trying to like build the hype for shopping online,
Yes.
and now we launched.
Marketing. Art marketing. I'm not familiar.
But I have a bunch of prints, and they just sit there, right there. And so, at some point, yeah. Also, if anyone ever wants anything, you're welcome just to lowball me. Maybe I should have said that sooner while there are more people here, but whatever.
A bunch of cilantro.
Yeah, whatever. Actually, no, the cilantro goes bad.
We don't want cilantro.
Yeah, we have a lot of cilantro that rotted recently.
Chives.
All right, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for coming, John. I'll see you sometime.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm gonna end this meeting, everybody.
See you later. Bye.
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 See you guys.
Wait a minute, Matt. Love the way that new print looks. I just love it. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. And this one's been all wrapped up for you guys for a long time, but it's just
Right. That was okay. I love that. Okay. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Matt.
Bye.
Good to see you, Anna.
See ya.
Bye, Heather. We'll chat sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. And then if you want to send me that shape thing, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, I'll do that right
That'd
now.
be awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right, I'm leaving. Bye, Aaron. If you're